View from the Gutters, episode 47. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss Animal Man by Grant Morrison, and to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip to 103.31. All right, View from the Gutters, episode 47.
47.
I'm Andrew Charn.
I'm Joe Preddy.
I'm Tobiah Panchin.
And I'm Kate Reynolds.
What are we talking about this week?
We're talking about Animal Man, but I want to do something real quick. I was listening to one of our really early episodes. I think it was Silver Surfer Requiem. Mm-hmm. And this has bothered me for a while. This is like ancient history. I said some things about Warren Ellis not finishing the things he started, and I've wanted to make a correction about that for a while. The fact that he didn't finish Fell and Dr. Sleepless and his second novel and stuff had very little to do with him not finishing it because he found other things to do. His hard drive crashed, and he took it to a store to get it replaced. And he went back later, and the store was boarded up, closed, nobody was there, and he lost everything. So I know that none of you give a shit, but it's been bothering me because I keep listening to that, and I cringe every time I hear it. Because
well, he still does. I mean, he still is known for not finishing.
He still is, but those things are ones I specifically call him on, and it were those things. It was those things specifically that were on the hard.
What about Global Frequency?
Global Frequency, I'm okay with where it ended.
Oh, okay.
So I just wanted to make that correction because
that's awfully big of you.
What about his run on Hellblazer?
I've got nothing to say about that because the only Hellblazer run that matters is Jamie Delano.
I don't know that I'll say the only one that matters,
well,
but it is my favorite.
My favorite one.
Yeah,
I don't think any writer ever got Hellblazer better than Jamie Delano, which segues nicely into Animal Man because
we are, and just to clarify, we're not talking about the New 52.
Yeah, Jeff Lemire. That's what we're talking
about. The original Animal.
No, we read New 52 Animal Man.
We read
that scam only works on me once.
I should have saved it for on the
New
mics.
52 Animal Man on the table when we walked in, and I was terribly concerned for a minute.
No, I've been reading the New 52 Animal Man after having reread Grant Morrison's Animal Man.
Yes.
Last week, I was like, I want more Animal Man, and so I've been reading the New 52 Animal Man. And as much as I shit on the New 52 Animal Man was one of the series that I picked up when it first started, and I still think it's kind of okay.
Jeff Lemire.
And it was written by Jeff Lemire,
who I like,
has done another thing recently in New 52 that was praised. I'm not sure if it was any good, but it was praised.
Which one was that?
I don't remember what it was.
He's writing Justice League Dark now, isn't he? Or Constantine, or one of those.
Oh, I think it's probably Justice League Dark.
It was either Green Arrow, or is there a New 52 Sandman?
Yes, but it's not Jeff Lemire.
New 52 Sandman?
It's Overture.
Well, yeah, but that has nothing to do with the New 52. No, that's the prelude. Right. Sandman Overture is the prelude.
Well, and there's also a new Vertigo series that just came out, the Dead Boy Detectives, which is a Sandman tie-in.
Well, and he's writing Trillium right now, too.
Which is great.
No, it was either Wesley Dodd Sandman or Green Arrow. Those were the two things.
He may have been writing Green Arrow. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I seem to remember him writing one of the
Jeff Lemire is great. I like his stuff a lot, and so I wanted to go read more.
I tried looking at Trillium again, and I just can't handle his artwork.
It's an acquired taste.
It's the opposite of what I like. And I'm not saying it's bad.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's the opposite of what I like.
The first time I read Jeff Lemire, it was Essex County Trilogy, and like the first whole story, I couldn't focus on anything but the art. Like, I had such a hard time reading it. But by the third story, I was really into it. And I don't know if the writing just got better or if I just was, like, able to palette the art a little bit better.
It could be. I mean, that was my experience with Mignola and Hellboy.
And so now when I read Jeff Lemire, though, it feels fine. And, like, I read Sweet Tooth after that and, like, really enjoyed that. So, but I don't know. It takes a while to get to. But,
let's talk about Animal Man.
Yeah, so
I'm really excited to talk about this.
Yeah. So you pitched it, Toby.
I did.
Tell me why'd you do that?
Explicating exactly why I like a Grant Morrison story is as difficult as saying the word explicating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's operating on so many different levels, most of which I enjoy.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. I have my nits to pick about this book. There's one part specifically that I actually don't care much for. But the rest of it is so good, just in the way that he addresses the metatext of the DC universe and comics in general, and the way that he treats Buddy Baker like a real human being. Like, he has a family. He's being a superhero as like a job because he wants to make, like, he wants to be on the cover of Rolling Stone, and he wants to have some money. Yeah. Like, and he wants to be, he wants people to respect him, and he doesn't always know what he's doing, and he's just kind of making it up as he goes along. Like, it's really different than what you see in superhero comics either before or since.
Well, and even though there have been other superheroes that are like want to be more like Booster Gold is a great example of a superhero who's like in it for the fame and trying to like be the famous person. Animal Man still comes from a place of like, I want to be a hero because I want to do heroic things. Like, I want to make the world a better place. Like, his bone to pick with the world is definitely rooted in his powers. Like, he is against animal cruelty. He's against eating meat. He becomes a vegetarian at the very beginning of this series, which is, I think a great thing for Animal Man to do. It makes a lot of sense. And Grant Morrison is a vegetarian, so not a stretch for him. But it's smart, right? Like, as someone who's that connected to those kind of things, would be passionate about those kind of things. So he teams up with, like, kind of terrorist organizations.
Basically eco-terrorists.
Yeah, to save animals. And I think that is an interesting story to be told about a superhero.
It is. I mean, and it's interesting because he is a conflicted character. Yeah. Like, he realizes that he's doing bad things and that he's mixed up with bad people, but he doesn't stop doing them.
Right.
Just because he's concerned about the methods.
Right.
And I mean, it's no secret that this book, along with Swamp Thing and Sandman, were kind of the basis of the creation of Vertigo Comics in the beginning. But I actually like the fact that this is a DC comic, not a Vertigo comic, and it's taking place in the DC universe. You know? Martian Manhunter shows up, Booster Gold shows up, Superman shows up.
Yeah, he joins the JLI, or the JLE.
He joins Justice League Europe.
Which is funny that he joins Justice League Europe when he lives in San Diego.
Yeah.
That doesn't really get addressed.
Wally West was also part of the Justice League Europe because
Justice League Europe,
JLA was not really
there was no
JLA
at that
point. Yeah, there was Justice League International and there was Justice League.
But my point is that I think it's really interesting to see a book about a superhero set in a superhero universe that isn't necessarily a superhero book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a book about superheroes, but he's not always being a superhero.
Right.
And which is a lot of the same things I like about it seems to show up more often, in my mind, in books like with teen heroes, where they have to balance their daily life bullshit with their superhero stuff. In a lot of teen stories, it's like, oh, how do I hide my secret identity from, whoever? But in this story, it's like, how do I balance being a dad, being a good husband, but still trying to get PR? And
I don't really ever. So this is interesting. I don't care for this. I don't really care for it. I think it starts off really strong for me, but I think it devolves quickly into Grant Morrison being like, animal cruelty, bad. I will fight. And I mean, like, I understand a lot of the things he's talking about, and I agree with him. Like, I'm definitely against animal cruelty, but he has a very simplified idea of what that means. Yeah. And, like, I feel like it's 10 or 12 issues in when he gets on his soapbox and he never quite gets back off of it again. And so I spend most of the comic feel like I'm being preached to, and then he commits the gravest of all comic book writer's sins, which is he puts himself in the book.
What? And no, that's not a grave sin. That's a classic. It's a classic of DC Universe.
I have never seen that done well. I've never seen it done in a way that fucking compels me.
I like it.
I hate it. I think it's one of my least favorite things, and it made me really dislike the end of this book.
I think that he does it as well. The way that he does it in this book is as good as I've ever seen anyone do it.
Well, it's
and I'll
DC.
agree with you on that, but I've never seen anybody do it well enough
And-
to make me care about it.
and
but
it
it's-
just barely falls flat for me.
Well,
It
but I
falls
think
by a long shot
I
for
think
me.
this is so strong that I think he does it in a way that is so strong because what he's talking about is the DC universe as a whole, like outside of the text, in a
and
meta
this
sense.
very meta text.
What he's
Well,
talking
yeah,
about
absolutely.
is the
What
DC universe.
as a comic book universe
And
is.
in the
Yeah,
DC,
I know, and I think he misses the mark. That's
No
what
way.
I'm like, I understand what he's doing. I don't like it.
But
I don't
this is
care
the
for
thing,
it,
though.
And he's done it in far, far better ways.
this is the thing about the DC universe, though. In the DC comic book universe, the DC universe is written by people who live on Earth Prime, which is a world
Oh, no,
in the DC
absolutely,
universe.
absolutely.
And all the time, characters
But
will go to
when-
to Earth Prime and visit DC writers, and then the DC writers will be like, "That gives me a great idea for a story.
No, I
I'll
understand
write
this
that,"
is a
and
conceit
that's
of
why
the-
that
this is a
story
conceit of the
exists.
Gold and Silver Ages.
Yeah.
When he brings Animal Man to him at the in
Yeah.
issue 26, he is on Earth, not
Prime.
Earth Prime.
No, he is on Earth
no,
Prime.
he's not.
When does
because
he say-
specifically says that Earth Prime has been destroyed?
Right, but he's also
He
like
says, "I am Grant Morrison. I'm the one that
Yes, but
created
he's
your
he's
book."
also talking about how like you can never visit me in my real world. This is just a reconstruction of what that world
Right,
And
is.
he's
because Grant
typing
Morrison is
on the
writing-
page.
That's the thing. He's writing the thing, and it's just to me, the minute Buddy Baker realizes he's a comic book character when he's up there with Hightower and everything,
Yeah.
the book rapidly starts to fall apart and never recovers. For me,
I
Well,
think
I want to go back to what you said a minute ago that he's done this better, and I agree with you. He has, but if I'm not wrong, this is the first time that he's done this. Like this is the opening salvo in a conversation that he continues to have for many years after that, in increasingly subtle and astute ways.
absolutely. But like, if I want to hear somebody talk to themselves, I'll go down and I'll listen to one of the hobos that walks around down here.
it
Like,
sleeps
that's
in
what it
front of
is.
our building. Sleeps in front
Grant
of our
Morrison
building.
is best when he's involving you in the conversation.
Yeah.
In this, he's not involving me in the conversation.
I
this is fucking masturbatory.
It is masturbatory,
It's
and I
completely
agree with you.
masturbatory. It's like-
but I consider it the sin of a young author.
And I agree with that. Like, definitely he goes on. This is Grant Morrison doing what Grant Morrison does best with superheroes, which is, here's the story. This is a story. This is a superhero. No, it's not a superhero story. Oh my god, everything's insane.
Well,
And like,
no,
at least
he
has
doesn't
the
always
decency
do.
to actually like put real hallucinogens in this one.
Yeah.
But that's what happens.
Well,
and it happens with
not
New X-Men,
necessarily.
and
It doesn't.
happens-
It doesn't. Okay, what happens in New X-Men is that shit just goes crazy. It's not a meta-textual book. It's not about the meta of comics. It's just about, hey, what can I do with these
But
toys?
that's
Can I
only
fuck them
because
up?
The DC universe lends itself better to that kind of meta.
And that's why this story works.
But
it would never have worked in the Marvel universe. It
It's
couldn't
not-
work
but
in
it-
any other universe.
see,
You
if
can't
it
do
worked,
this in the
I
Invincible
would've bought
universe.
it, and I didn't, so it didn't work.
It does-
What's amazing is that it works so well, and that it was written in 1998, right after the Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was the first
88.
time.
88, yeah.
What did I say? 98.
Yeah, it's good.
88. Nobody had ever rebooted
Yeah.
a comic book universe before.
Nope.
Like nobody knew that was a
Well-
thing that could happen until they did it.
Miracle Man sort of did it with Alan Moore, but it is supposedly living in the continuity of Marvel Man, but they put the new name on it and they like
Right.
started it fresh. So like that the what was Gold, not Gold Key.
Well, I mean, they brought back characters before. I mean, the Silver Age Flash was them taking a Golden Age character and going, "Oh, well, we'll do this again."
Yeah, but it wasn't like a hard reboot. I mean, like resetting everything in the characters' lives and then starting them over was something that I feel like was kind of and especially for the whole universe was really unique. I agree. Like
Yeah,
in
I mean,
'85,
I think that this book points out very specifically why the Crisis was such a radical sea change
yeah,
for the comic book universe that it ended the Silver Age.
yeah.
But, and that's I think that's the problem. Is he's trying to tell this story, and he can't pick any character, right? There are better characters to tell this story through. There are people like the Phantom Stranger and Vandal Savage, people that have been around a long time. There's people like the Psycho
Well,
Pirate.
who shows
Animal
up?
Man, how is Animal Man? I never
Well, I
buy
think-
the fact that Animal Man is the linchpin of this whole thing because he's fucking Animal Man.
Well, no, I think that Animal Man actually sits at a very interesting point because and I was looking this up on Wikipedia as I was reading it, he had only appeared
And, like,
11 times.
He
over
never
the
had a
last
family
Never
before.
had his
5
own
years.
title. He was an older man. He had
Yeah,
very
he-
typical like radiation power
Yeah.
storyline.
He never had his own family.
Yeah.
He never had any
And
kids.
so I think Grant Morrison humanizes him, but I think William Mesner Loebs is doing the same thing to Wally West exactly at the same time.
yeah, but
Wally
I
West
think
is a guy that needs a job. He wants to join the Justice League because it's a steady paycheck. He doesn't know what the fuck he's doing with his powers. I mean, he's single, but his love life and his.
But I
and
think
those
this is
people
the
he made-
story-
I think this is largely humanizing those heroes that had been so godlike.
well, and Cookie
is-
Cutter
is-
too is when Eric
Well, yeah,
Eric
is
Eric and
the
I were talking
mission
about
of
this
that age
on the
you
show
know?
on a previous episode. I don't remember what it was, but that like Silver Age superheroes were often interchangeable.
Yeah,
Just had different
hey,
masks
John, how
on
you doing, buddy?
because
What's
they
going
don't.
on, guy?
They had no personalities, and the modern age of comics and what attracted me and a lot of people to DC Comics was that these were characters that were new that you could get involved in and were being like they were interesting characters. Like they had depth and they were different. Wally West is a very different than Kyle Rayner, and they are both very different than Buddy Baker. And I think that Buddy Baker is an interesting character. And I can't imagine who else you would have done this with because my first thought is who do you tell like a crazy story like that through is like probably like Phantom Stranger or Mr. E or like, but they know too much. Like, those characters are based on the fact that they know shit that you don't know. Like, Swamp Thing and Constantine are all that way. They're like, they know shit. That's how they survive.
Yeah.
Buddy Baker knows nothing. You are playing the role of Buddy Baker in the story, and he's telling you all this shit. And even if you had never read comics before Crisis on Infinite Earths, I still think this book works. I think it's a great story.
I mean, I don't think it is. I think there's definitely elements of a great story there, but it never gels for me.
Well,
it just jumps like what Grant Morrison is trying to do here, I feel, is it's overly ambitious. The story is there, but he doesn't have the patience to let it play out. Like this kind of meta-textual story, you can't like the worst thing you can do in those stories is rush them.
On a certain level, I appreciate that though, because when it comes to Grant Morrison and metatext and weird self-referential stories, this is very much in the shallow end. This is the kiddie pool of like Grant Morrison going off the fucking page. But I think that makes it accessible. I think the fact that it's the first half of somebody telling you a story, and then they're like rushing to get to the end, and they leave a lot out, and you're like, but what about this, and what about this, and what about this? It leads you to look at the things that Morrison has done since then, like The Invisibles and The Filth. And in The Filth, he does something very, very similar to what he's doing here in terms of treating the comic book universe as a universe that exists within a comic book.
right.
Like, I think that it primes you to be able to understand and accept those things in a way that you might not be able to do without this.
And
I think
I also think that 26 issues is like the perfect length for this story. Like whether the pacing is off or not is a different issue. And that like I agree. Sometimes the pace is like kind of, especially when you read like the first six issues of it, and it's basically like he fights Bawana Beast and like it's like very superhero-y stuff, which I
Wile E.
totally
Coyote as Jesus.
I totally love those stories. Like I love that because it reminds me of 80s comics at the time. Like it's just cool superhero stuff. And when it starts to become meta as a text when Psycho Pirate's first introduced and you're like, "Oh, shit's going down. What's weird here? What's going on?" You start to see like, oh, cool, and then it just accelerates to the end. Like how fast I read that third trade every time is always astonishing to me because I just like can't put it down. I burn through it. And if this series was 50 issues, 60 issues, 100 issues, like I don't know that I could make it through it every time.
Well, no, and I don't necessarily think that there needs to be more issues. The fact of the matter is, for me, it's very jarring. I enjoy the Buona Beast story. I enjoy there's some very
that
good
Wile E.
stuff
Coyote
in here.
story is awesome.
And there's some very meta stuff going on here, but I feel that it's kind of, for me, I can never really fully interact with the character because right when I start to get it, he goes back to like animal cruelty bad, and I'm like, well, dude, like, okay, I get this.
Even he admits,
yeah, exactly.
the story,
he
like
does it
I was
badly.
being preachy,
but it's like It's like, fuck you, then don't fucking, like, he puts himself in there, and I just want to fucking punch his smug, stupid face.
And I agree.
It's like, you put yourself in here to justify your shitty storytelling. And this is the shittiest way of doing that.
But how good is the story right before that moment? Like, right after he's carried the monkey across the wasteland and he gets back to his house.
Yeah.
Like, the moment before he opens that door and goes and talks to Grant Morrison.
Well,
like,
I love it.
every
But
single
I didn't-
time, it almost brings me to the edge of tears.
Well, he
I'm
opens
not
that door
gonna
and his
lie.
dog and his cat are dead, and he's like,
Yeah.
"I'm sorry, I was gone for something." Like the way that he moves time in this story is like
From the
really
point
fun.
when he takes peyote with Hightower and he realizes he's in a comic book universe, I stopped caring about the story and
Well,
I've never reconnected.
I love the part when Psycho Pirate is there, like handing out DC comic books from a past era. Like
Yeah,
you can
and
see
I
the
was
flash
just like-
of Two Worlds. I love that.
I just felt that he's like spooging all over the place, dude. That's
I
it.
loved it because it's
It's
like,
like-
whenever in a DC it's like if you see stuff like Ambush Bug and like these very in Deadpool, these very fourth wall breaking characters that are like, oh, I'm in a comic book, oh, I got all these pouches, right, Rob? Like they do that kind of shit and it's funny and it's good and it's like, aha, but this isn't funny. Like, this is
No.
a serious story set in the DC Universe in which characters are holding comic books of a previous era of DC Universe, and I still believe that the story's happening.
And I don't. And not only that, but I feel that because it's done in such a fucking... and it's just... I feel like it was done very haphazardly. I don't feel that there's none of the care of the fucking Invisibles in here, or even fucking Doom Patrol. And I really fucking hate it when he drops Doom Patrol in there for Animal Man to read.
Yeah.
It's like... a story like that, what you're selling, you have to be you have to be good enough to sell that.
Yeah.
Like there's definitely fucking, you can see what he will go on to write. Like looking back and thinking, it's no surprise he started here. And he's gotten much, much better.
Sure.
Like he can sell the shit out of those stories now.
Yeah.
But and maybe that's part of it. Maybe if I was reading this just from the get-go, not having any experience with Grant Morrison, I would be able to appreciate it more.
Well,
but coming from the Invisibles, Doom Patrol, the Filth, and even his superhero stuff, I look at it and I'm like, you totally missed the fucking pitch on this one, man. Like, it totally does.
Well, I think
it's almost more frustrating because he does lay those threads down, and he did get me interested. And then I feel like when I read that panel, when he's like, oh my God, I'm not real. This is all a story being written by somebody else. They're all looking at us. I feel like I'm being given the fucking brush off. That's what I mean. It's like, I'm not going to fucking deal with any of this.
It
like,
feels very like college term paper.
It does, yes. It does. Or I would say
the fourth or fifth time. I totally agree with you, but that one aspect of the story doesn't diminish all the other great stuff that's happening in this comic book. The part where when he's fighting Psycho Pirate quotation marks because they never really fight. The moment where he like steps outside of the panel and he's like suddenly running through the gutters while all of this stuff is happening.
Yeah, he's like leaning
outside of
over the
universe.
gutters and like tapping
And
on
that
people.
moment when you realize that white space that the aliens take him to is the gutters of a comic book.
Right. Well, it's a
Like-
blank page. It's unwritten. It's
Right.
nothing's there. Nothing exists in that place. And I like it when they fade
Except
from
us.
color to white, and the sketches, like the guys become more sketchy until they're
Right,
just
right.
like the wireframe, and then
Like,
they're gone.
No one else had done that
It's-
before.
And
It's
that's, I
super
mean,
ambitious, and I think the art, something we haven't talked about yet, is the art like makes that work so well.
who is it? It's Cliff Truog, I want to say, and
Because it starts off so feeling like such a traditional superhero story, but by the end, like all of those
Drogue.
all of those tricks that he's playing with the panels and the gutters and the white space and the just I think it's so interesting, and I think the art, like when he's
Chaz
traveling,
Truog and Doug Hazlewood.
when he's traveling with that ape, when he's carrying the monkey,
with covers by Brian Boland.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
when he's walking with the monkey through wherever he's going, like all of that stuff is awesome.
Yeah, that whole issue 24,
Yeah.
I love.
Yeah. I think that this story has so many good moments that it's worth reading again and again. And I think this may be my first exposure. This was my first exposure to Grant
and
Morrison.
I think
Because since then I've read more of his superhero stuff and like All-Star Superman, but I still never read all of Doom Patrol because I just like every time I try to start it, like
when I pitched it, I specifically didn't do Doom Patrol.
Yeah.
Because Doom Patrol is weirder than this.
and
is.
since then I think Seven Soldiers of Victory. That's Morrison, right? Yeah, I've read
that was unreadable. I think.
That's the only one I've like gotten through.
Really?
Well, yeah, because I can't read all of Invisibles.
Like, I wanted to read that because of Clarion the Witch Boy.
Yeah.
Was in it, and I found it to be unreadable. Like, I had no fucking idea. And I think you have to get... They released it in, like, smaller trades that collected each character's arc or something.
Yeah, it was like 7 4-issue arcs or something like that.
Yeah, and that's not reading order. You have to get the trade where they put it in reading order, because otherwise you will have no fucking idea what's going on.
Yeah, it was pretty much unreadable in single issues. I remember picking it up when it first came out, but I would like to try it again.
Yeah.
With the trades where it's actually in reading order.
Well, I think that Grant, this is a great. I think this was a great pitch by Toby, because this is a great way to wet your feet in the pool that is Grant Morrison. Because,
I mean, if you want to know what to expect from the Invisibles, this will give you an idea of it. But
and I still think
if you
stands...
read this and you want more,
yeah,
my God, read the Invisibles. And if you read this and you're like, I hated everything that happened. Never read
don't read Grant Morrison
I
again.
don't think that's true, because I love the Invisibles, and I love Doom Patrol. I like Doom Patrol. I love the Invisibles, and I thought the filth was good. And I don't really care. I past like issue 12 or 13, I don't care for anything.
But if you had never read a story that did any of these things before,
I think
this story would be a lot different to you.
I mean,
I could see this comic being mind blowing for somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, Joe's daughter, Audrey, who has read a number of fairly standard superhero comics. And I mean, she read Emperor Joker, which is kind of headbending in the way that reality is played with.
Right.
But I think that when she gets a little bit older and a little bit more mature and has read more traditional superhero stuff, giving her something like this would be kind of mind-blowing.
Well, I remember reading it when I wasn't young when I was reading this, but I remember reading it and being like, man, that was different. Yeah. Like, nothing I've ever read was like that. And I think that that's what it was like in 88. Was like... If you were reading this as these came... Well, yeah, a lot of people were doing things differently, but no one else was doing this.
Well, no, I mean,
this feels right out of, like, underground comics or, like, the UK indie scene.
I want to say that...
I mean, it's very obvious that Morrison is coming from having written comics in the British tradition.
Yeah. I think both Swamp Thing and Sandman are both telling more meta-textual stories. I mean...
Not about the DC universe, though.
Not about the DC universe so much, but...
And even Sandman doesn't really start becoming about what's going on outside of the page until like the 4th or 5th trade.
But I mean,
I would not call Sandman metatextual at all.
Well, it talks about like literature in general and stories.
Yes, it's about the nature of stories.
Yeah,
which I think. I mean, if you're
that's an entire wing of fantasy literature.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think
I mean, a lot of fantasy stories trade on the nature of myth and story and what it means to be a mythological character.
What was the first? What's the Sandman story where the Endless are like sitting on the hill and they're watching A Midsummer's Night's Dream?
That's A Midsummer's Night's Dream.
Yeah, well, it's like early in the story though. It's like what like issue.
It's an
like
add-on to one of the third or something.
Yeah,
third or fourth trade.
Anyway, that's the first time I think that becomes about telling stories for the first time. And so I would say that this was probably happening at the same time, if not earlier than Sandman. And I think that Swamp Thing is written by Alan Moore, who's been playing with shit like that since he could talk. So it's not really fair to be like, oh, no one has done anything like that, because Grant Morrison is definitely following Alan Moore's footsteps on this, I think, because Alan Moore used to write stories that were about, you know, let's push this idea of our medium like as far as you possibly can and expose the errors of this medium within the medium itself. Stuff that we talk about Mark Waid doing now, he was doing with Watchmen, he was doing with Miracle Man.
Oh, absolutely.
He was doing with, you know...
does it with Top 10.
Yeah, whatever happened to the world. I'm talking about Alan Moore's like early stuff, though, you know? Yeah. And so I think that this is... And all three of those, Alan Moore, Gaiman, and... Morrison and Delano, who wrote Hellblazer, like they're all British writers. this was the British invasion into DC Comics
Oh,
in like a
absolutely.
huge
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Was
Because
80.
that's what DC was looking for post-crisis.
They were looking for,
Well,
you
they
know,
wanted
different
new blood.
shit,
They wanted new
and
things.
what is it, 2000 AD? Is that the British?
2000
like
AD.
that had already been publishing Marvel and DC stories,
Yeah.
republishing them, but like this was. They were writing new stories, and those authors that grew up in the 2000 AD tradition, like all transferred over into big mainstream comics in a huge way.
Yeah.
And I think that really changed comics in a way.
Well, Brian Boland does all the covers for this, and he's right out of 2000 AD.
Richard Starkings, who created Comicraft Lettering Company and writes
Alan
fantastic
Moore
stories.
himself wrote for 2000
Yeah,
AD.
they all did. I mean, I think that the 80s, the late 80s, mid 80s, Alan Moore being probably the first guy to show up there. But, you know, the 80s were definitely, this is what DC was looking for. They were looking for something so different from what they were doing before.
Oh, absolutely.
And they were pushing their universe into a new and interesting place. And I think this book does it
and
as well as
they
any of those
knew-
other
they
books.
saw how popular Watchmen was, and they knew that there was an adult readership out there, and so they
Well,
went after them.
Well, they definitely were making an attempt to age their readers from the Silver Age to the Modern
Absolutely.
Age, because you can see the difference between Crisis on Infinite Earths and this, and Crisis on Infinite Earths and everything that came after,
Yeah.
and even the mainstream titles like Superman, Man of Steel,
Well, yeah,
John
because
Byrne's
you
Man
had-
of Steel.
Yeah, you had John
Superman
Byrne.
was now a thousand times more interesting of a character because he was
Absolutely.
not just like
Well,
I
and you
will,
had Legends of the Dark Knight in 89,
Oh, yeah.
which was doing the same thing
which
for
we
Batman.
talked about on the Venom episode.
Yeah.
But like,
And even Hal Jordan goes through this like soul searching kind of thing too, and like Jon Stewart's hanging out with the old one on like old Oa or something because Xanshi is just blown up.
in Cosmic Odyssey, which
Yeah,
we talked about
which
in
we
the
talked
Cosmic
about.
Odyssey episode.
And it's a great book, and you should read it. So like, I mean, all these major characters like Wonder Woman's working at the embassy.
She's
and
being a terrible character as
she's
normal.
being but
Was
well,
that-
no,
was
that's
that
the
when-
George Perez run, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that
That's
was
like
the-
one of the most lauded runs.
Actually,
Was that when Wonder Woman went from being from Paradise Island to being from Themyscira?
Maybe she was
Or did
the
that happen
baddest
in the Silver Age?
I'm
that
not
I,
sure.
became
I have
Themyscira?
no idea.
I'm
wish
pretty
Eric
sure
was
she-
here.
In the
'cause
Golden
he's-
Age, it was just Paradise Island.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then it becomes Themyscira at some point. But
Eric would know.
she's like doing stuff over there, and like so. This is
Well, yeah.
this is
Everybody's-
a time of like nobody is like flying around and kind of
nobody's
clipping each other on the shoulders and being like, "Hey, buddy, how you doing?"
Well, nobody's
Everybody's
happy
kinda-
all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
shit's they have real problems now that aren't. Hey, a
Which
supervillain is
is-
punching a bank.
and
Like they're different problems.
Grant Morrison hates
That
this
happens.
era of comics. By the way, Grant Morrison despises this era of comics, and he says it in the introduction to Mark Waid's Midsummer's Nightmare, where he talks about Kingdom Come and where he right before he starts running JLA and trying to kind of bring it back to this
Right.
much more like superhero-y type of thing.
Well, the guy he's very into the idea of the super heroic god characters, and if
it's like the opposite of Alan Moore.
Well, if you want to read that story where he tells the superhero god story, like All-Star Superman is that story.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
the JLA taps into that in a huge way, because I
Yeah.
think that very first 5 issues of the JLA where they're dealing with an alien Justice League that comes down and is like, we are going to make the world a utopia and do what you should have did a long time ago. Should have did a long time ago. No, I
1998.
yeah, and it's so I think that even though he doesn't really like this era of comics, the like kind of floundery early 80s.
I think it's great. I think you got some great stuff going on.
I think that this era of comics is more interesting than anything.
It's hugely transitional, which means that it's a great place to find kind of weird, off-the-wall things that people tried out and then never did again.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you have stuff like the Justice League of Justice League of America is no longer.
Yeah.
Superman is dead.
Yeah.
And now,
Briefly.
Yeah, but now
Well,
you have a
that's a
new
little later, but
team.
yeah.
Well, no, Superman dies in '93, and now you have a new team.
Yeah, but he's back by like 94.
Yeah, but you have a new team of guys that are going to take
With
over
a
the
beautiful
mantle of the
mullet.
JLA.
Yeah.
But
Well, even-
call it
but
the
even at
Justice
that point,
League
he's not on the
International.
JLA, is he?
No, he's not on JLA. It's Batman and Martian Manhunter, the only original, and Black
Yeah.
Canary are the
Yeah.
only original
It's
members.
JLI. It's
And it's the
pretty much
JLI,
the JLI runs
and it's a
around.
fucking comedy book.
Oh yeah, and
Like-
one of the best books coming out at that I'm like,
I mean, it's
JLI,
superheroes.
hands down.
I love the
is somebody
JLI,
who's-
but it's superheroes. But imagine like it's so crazy to think that of a universe taking their like biggest named team and not
Getting
telling
rid of it, yeah.
super heroic stories with
Yeah.
them, but instead telling like funny stories, but also just like, yeah, we're not really sure how we fit into the world anymore stories.
Yeah. Well, because I think that was.
I think this
the
era
point.
I think this era is interesting, and I think that this book is a huge part of why that era is interesting, because I think this story is very interesting. And I think that despite its missteps that it may or may not have, I still think that this kind of book is important to the DC universe at that time.
It definitely has them.
It could not have been told in any other comic universe.
I agree with you.
And
I agree
it shouldn't be
completely.
told in any other comic universe because it fits so well into how the DC universe works.
Was there something that you wanted to add, Cade? Because you've been pretty quiet
Yeah.
through this whole thing. And
I've been
whenever
waiting-
that happens, I feel like you're building to something.
Yeah.
It's just that I've been waiting for you guys to start repeating the same things over and over, which just happened.
Yes.
So I'm gonna
Full circle.
go ahead and say what I thought, so that we're not just taking up time. So I actually really liked this book. This was my first time reading it. There were parts that were a little hard to get through, but I'm really glad that I stuck with it through those parts and got to the ending, because it's hard for me because I actually really did like the ending with this book,
Yeah,
but
me
I did
too.
feel that it wasn't done perfectly, which I guess things very rarely are. There were moments with other superheroes that I absolutely loved. We saw, Ralph and Sue Dibney. I've been reading Crisis on Infinite Earths, which I'm not quite done yet, and I just recently read Identity Crisis as well. And so it was really neat to see those two again. And I mean, even though there was the whole like, oh no, there's a divorce might be happening.
I
it's
loved that.
like-
I loved the hinting at that like she's not happy being married to Ralph because Ralph's crazy.
No, he
But-
There's this
absolutely
weird
is.
tie-in with JLI going on there too.
Yeah.
where she's just like, it's not just him. It's that she has to put up with him and his constant mystery solving, but also Blue Beetle and Booster Gold.
Well,
And
Constantly
Metamorpho.
being Blue Beetle and Booster Gold.
she goes and hangs out at the JLI headquarters all the time, and it's
Yeah.
just like nothing but fucking weird ass
It's
superheroes
Why
all
is
the
she
time.
even hanging out there?
I don't know,
It's
because
like
she
living
always
in a frat
has.
house. It really is like living
Sue
in a frat house
Dibney,
at that point.
part of her character is she like hangs out with the Justice League.
Yeah,
Like she
because
is
she's,
more
like,
than
the
anybody
mom of
else.
the Justice
She
League.
is a character that like hangs out there. Like Lois never hangs out with the Justice
No,
League. Like
she's
none of
doing-
the
she's
other
got shit
wives.
to do.
She's
Yeah.
got shit to do.
But Sue apparently has
Dibney-
nothing to do.
Well, Sue was in. I mean,
She was the housewife, basically,
Well,
the mom of the Justice
I think, I mean,
League.
she never had her own job. I mean, like, this is actually a fairly decent critique of her character, which is she never had anything going on except that she was Ralph's wife, which is kind of sad. But what I really like about that scene is it adds a whole nother layer to the DC universe, which they attack that relationship heavily in a book we'll talk about in the future, Identity Crisis. So, like, just having the idea that Ralph and Sue were, like, borderline divorce all the time, like, adds into that, in an
Yeah,
interesting way,
absolutely.
which I forgot was in the book. And then when I reread it this time, I was like, oh, man. Well, yeah, go on, Kate. You had more to say. You're talking about the tie-ins with other superheroes.
Yeah, because like I've
Martian
been reading
Manhunter?
the Crisis on Infinite Earths recently, and even though I haven't finished it yet, it is just so much. I don't even know what the word is. It has very similar styling. You've kind of got the people all talk the same. The narration kind of goes along with that as well, and I mean it's just cool because it's like taken out of the same time period and is even like in many ways a sequel to Crisis on Infinite
Oh,
Earths,
definitely.
because you've got the return of the Psycho Pirate,
Yeah.
and so I thoroughly enjoyed reading those issues.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved the peyote trip. I thought that was kind of cool because I really liked that after the peyote trip was over, he didn't remember looking out at you
Yeah.
reading it, And I was like, okay, so even though that moment kind of creeped me out, oh shit, he sees me.
Yeah.
The fact that it disappeared, it's like, okay, I'm safe again.
Yeah.
I'm not in this comic book world anymore.
Yeah.
Which is totally a move that they replay in Infinite Crisis.
Yeah.
When Alexander Luthor, spoilers for Infinite Crisis, I guess.
Yeah, skip ahead a couple
Hey, I've
seconds.
never read it.
When Alexander Luthor like pulls the universe apart into the multiverse again, and he's looking for Earth Prime, and he's like, "Oh, there it is!" And he's looking and reaching out of the panel towards the reader.
Yeah,
because that's where Earth Prime is.
Cool.
Like that's just a cool moment that I felt is definitely a
it's
callback to this.
Super an homage to this. Yeah, dude, this is like one of the most famous panels in DC Comics history. I feel like is that I can see
if it isn't, it should be.
Yeah, it's. I can't think of anything more like iconically DC multiverse than that.
Yeah, and that like really creeped me out. I was so invested at that point. I was like, oh shit, he sees
Well, you
me.
did a lot of heavy research for this, and also during the peyote trip in the book, you took peyote with me and to read. Just to get into character.
Maybe
You're
I'm glad I don't
hours in my
remember.
apartment.
If that were true, I would be very upset with both of you.
Yeah, well, you weren't there, but Joe was taking care of everybody,
I was on it.
and Cade wrecked your apartment.
Well, he thought
Maybe
it was.
I'm glad I don't
He
remember. most of
regressed to a
this.
primal state. Have you ever seen Altered States? It was really similar to that.
Cade's method.
Cade is much bigger than William Hurt, though, so he was able to do much more damage.
Yeah.
But we got him calmed down with a
Yeah.
smoothie and
Cade
and
also
muffin.
went and found some aliens to take on Animal Man's powers. For
He did.
this,
So now Cade is Speeder Man.
And now in the new 52 universe, Cade is now dealing with the Red, so we'll see how...
So I'm
Cade's-
Speederman, and sometimes I team up with Namir the Submariner
Namir?
and Dr. Dam.
Yes,
no,
yes.
Namor is the one name that at the comic book store that I was working at that was always pronounced a different way every time
Namor?
somebody's. I've gotten
Do you have any Namor comics?
like legitimately. I've never heard more pronunciations of any other superhero than Namor. I was like every time it was new, and I was like, it was just.
Namor?
I should have written
Do you
them
have
all
any,
down.
Amor?
Namor. I don't know. It was always something
Namor?
different. Yeah, like it was anything because he's not a super popular character, and he's never been in a movie or a TV show in which they like tell you how to say their name.
Nemor. Can I have some Nemor comics, please?
Namor.
Nemo R. Nemo R.
Namor. He just like I don't know that one for some reason.
Just
no one can
in
say.
case you're wondering, it's Namor.
It's Namor.
It's Namor.
Namor.
It's Amor.
Anyway, back to Kate's point.
I don't remember what my
we were
point
talking.
was.
You were talking about the peyote trip and like the looking at the page, and I'm right there with you. I'm always so invested in this book. By the time that I get to that I'm just like, yeah, like I just want to reach through the
was
panel and
like,
high five, buddy.
Oh shit! Can he really see me? And then like he couldn't remember it after the trip was
Yeah.
over, and I was like, oh, thank God, I'm safe. And then it goes on to like break even more shit, and like this whole time I'm like kind of freaking out, but like in a controlled way.
I also feel like this book has so much going on as far as like meta stuff happening outside the text, stuff happening on Earth Prime, quote unquote, you know. But the one thing that it handles so well is something that most writers can't even fucking deal is time travel.
Yeah.
This book also
That
has
was
time travel in it,
interesting.
and it
That was
works
definitely
so
interesting.
well because 4 issues before you even know there's going to be time travel in it, you see like future Buddy Baker being a creeper
Well,
outside
you
his own
see-
house.
I mean, you see a lot of that, and it's never. That is handled well, and
That's
I
handled
will say,
so
Which is cool
well.
because he means that he was planning all of this well ahead of
Well
time.
ahead of time.
I think that's
even
great.
as early as issue 5.
I thought it was 4.
Psycho
or maybe it
Pirates
was
in it.
4. Oh no, I'm talking about the one with the Wile E. Coyote, and you
Oh,
see
yeah.
that somebody else is drawing it,
Yeah,
and you also see that there
Okay,
were
that is
that's
5.
That's 5.
yeah, and then there were also the words that it basically he mirrored it later in issue 15 where the words were written on the computer, but they were written by hand in one of the earlier
Yeah.
ones. And so like when you finish, you're like, so much of that was planned. It's like homaging its own self. And
Yeah,
mirroring
it is like
its own
weirdly
self.
self-referential for a book that's not very long. I think it was really well planned. I think that the time travel stuff really blew my mind the first time I read it, because I was just like, that's handled so well, and so many people fuck up time travel and can't do it right. And the DC universe has tons of time travelers, and so it was cool to see him use a character who was like not used to time travel.
It was also kind of funny to see Rip Hunter, because I didn't really get to know the character until after or during 52,
right,
like the original
Yeah.
52. Because Buddy Baker goes to him and he's like, I need a time machine. And they're like, no, we can't trust anyone who's not experienced with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Rip's kind of like, what's the worst he can do? Here you go, buddy. It's
Yeah.
kind of broken, but you'll
Yeah.
be fine.
I love that.
It's so weird.
And I think that, well, you guys were mentioning earlier about the ending of the book, and something I wanted to talk about was, in a superhero universe that's in mainstream continuity, at the end of the story, writers often have to, like, put the toys that they're playing with back into the toy box the same way that they found them, so that the next...
And oftentimes that's not done very well.
Oh, it's almost... I find it, like, so jarring at the end of a big story arc when someone's, like, told a cool story with someone and then is like, and now I have to push the reset button because Superman can't be made of lightning and, you know...
He can in your heart, Chard.
Yeah, he can, but, like, you know, at some point the universe has to go back to the way that we all knew it was, or Bruce Wayne has to be Batman again for some reason, and, like, it doesn't end well usually. Usually you're like, oh, I wish that hadn't happened, but I guess I'll go read the next story. One More Day is another terrible example of, like, hey, let's fuck with the toys and make, and it's just, like, it's so jarring, but this story does it so well that at the end of the story, I mean, Grant Morrison has fridged his wife and kids and just put Buddy through hell. And at the end of the story, it's kind of okay because he's just like, none of it really happened because I'm a writer and I'm just going to put you back to before that was there.
Yeah.
So you get to...
It's kind of weird
But
and a little bit
Buddy does
unsatisfying,
grow.
but strangely appealing.
Yeah, I find it tremendously unsatisfying because he's pretty much just like, I'm done. Can't figure out a way out of this. I'll just insert myself into the story and then I'll make everything the way it was.
Well, the thing is that if he was doing that as a way to get out of what he had done, I would have more problem with it. The fact that he was intentionally leading up to that point all along, I think makes it more okay.
I feel like he was leading up to certain things about it. I don't necessarily think that he may have been leading up to him himself being in the story.
No, but I think...
I think either way...
Well, another thing that I thought was really cool is that he actually knew how many issues he was going to do.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
That 27 he wrote was the number of issues of Animal Man he penned if you include the Secret Origins issue that wasn't numbered in it.
Yeah.
It's also the date that he killed, that the kid dies.
Well, yeah, it was 9/27,
Yeah.
but the 27 was a reference to the number of issues he had to write.
I think that a lot of this was planned, and I think that it was really... I mean, you're like, oh, this story's going along fine, nothing can possibly go wrong, and then everything starts to go wrong, and you're like, there is no way out of this. And there isn't.
No,
there's no way to put those toys back in the toy box except to
he
go...
just does a soft reboot. And
well, yeah, but how else would you do it except to kill off Animal Man and, like, let nobody remember?
Well, no, but that's kind of what I like about this book, because coming in the aftermath on Crisis on Infinite Earths and dealing with a lot of those issues, he's setting up in-text reasons why the universe is kind of sloshing around, and something's one way and then it's another, and things that used to fit in really well don't fit in anymore. I mean, he does that whole arc with the white gorilla guy who's immortal, and at the end they're just like, oh, you're not part of the universe anymore, goodbye.
What? Oh, yeah. I love that story.
Yeah, like, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And they pick up those themes again in Infinite Crisis, finally 15, 16 years later. Mm-hmm. But I really love the way that they're... At the end, he's just like, okay, and now as the writer, I'm pushing the reset button because it's a comic book universe, and that's how these things work.
Yeah.
And he's making explicit in the text, this is how things work sometimes. The universe kind of is wibbly-wobbly and sloshes around. And, you know,
and
first Supergirl or Power Girl...
to do that.
Yeah, first Power Girl is Superman's cousin, and then she's an Atlantean princess, and then she's this thing, because the universe isn't fixed. That way.
Well, and that's what I like, is because, like, the only way for the DC Comics universe to work is that even in the DC universe,
it's fluid.
they know that it's written by other people.
Yeah.
And I think that that's like super interesting way to tell that story.
And that, I mean, it kind of flows into what eventually became Hyper Time, which I know is a really contentious subject.
Right.
But I never really had any problems with it.
And yeah. Well, Grant Morrison also had his whole like hyper crisis idea in the 90s, which became Final Crisis in the 2000s.
Yeah.
So
Let's not get into that because there could be hurt feelings.
I might die.
Well, yeah.
I might die.
I think at the end, I feel this way the same way I feel. I thought of a really good example. I'm a huge Wes Anderson fan, but I hate Bottle Rocket. And there are glimpses of what Wes Anderson will go on to do and make, in my opinion, much, much better films.
Sure.
In Bottle Rocket, but overall, I can't stand it. And that's how it's similar to how I feel about Animan. I don't hate this book. I really like the first 14 episodes. The issue where he's fighting the time
controller.
Yeah, the
with the hourglass.
Clock Commander.
Yeah.
the Clock Commander.
I forgot about
with
that.
The
I love that
JLI
one.
is really good. And it's the next issue. I think that's 15, so 16 is where it all starts to kind of fall apart for me.
Well, I love that.
It's where they burn down the thing, and it's all like, oh, moral, blah blah blah. But I mean, like the whole first thing with Buona Beast, the whole picking the new beast.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot to like in here.
Yeah.
But it's the stuff where he's playing with the idea of superheroics and kind of doing this like, I'm not very good at this. I don't really understand. You know, I'm kind of captivated by this idea of like, I want to do good, even though I may not be as good as like other people that maybe trained longer than I did, or, you know, that like he's not Superman, he's not Batman, he's not the Flash.
He's not
just
even
doing
Blue
his
Beetle.
best.
Yeah, he's not even Blue Beetle.
And like, and I really like that. I like that he's just.
I also
kind
love
of
that he teams up with Vixen, who has the same powers as him.
Yeah,
like you
totally.
would, in a team up book, you want people that are like different, and not to acknowledge the fact that those two characters sound exactly the same if you have them talk to each other. Like you try to hide that from everyone,
totally,
right?
totally.
But this is him just being like, "Hey, look, isn't this weird? They both have the same powers. Let's team them up." It's like I love that.
They're both like, okay, gorilla punch.
Yeah,
and they both punch at the same time.
other really funky thing that Grant Morrison does here, which I don't mind when he does it because it's kind of an interesting idea. But this idea of the morphogenetic field, which is something that certain people actually believe in, that there's this kind of like, which is absolute hooey. It's absolute hooey.
Yeah, but it's the kind of hooey that works really well in a comic book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's
I mean,
kind of
isn't
like,
it any less hooey than solar radiation makes him fly?
No. At first you're like, that's kind of stupid. And then you're like, wait a minute. He actually just took this giant leap in power from like, oh, I'm going to hang out with Blue Beetle to like, now you're hanging out with the big dogs because you can like, oh, it's like, well, now I have the strength of a brontosaurus. That's fucking like, that's huge, right?
Yeah,
Well,
like
it's
if you
buildings.
and that's another great thing that Morrison does in this is like when you really tunnel down into this guy's power, like he's fucking immortal.
Well,
like
and
he can just
during,
regenerate his
during
arm and he
50
can duplicate himself.
During 52, he's he's flying in space with the Sun Eaters because he can tap into their powers.
The 52, that Animal Man, Starfire, and
they're
Adam
like
Strange.
Adam Strange.
They're
That
all hanging
story
out in
is
space.
my favorite part of 52.
You know what is actually really cool, at least for me? I read this before 52 came out.
Yeah.
So you were one of 5 people who knew who Animal Man was.
Well,
Well,
there's that.
I mean, I
but
did too.
the first thing that I thought, the second that Superman showed up on the panel, is Superman's an animal. Animal Man could totally take his powers.
Yeah.
And then after 52 happened, Jeff Johns, Greg Rucka, and Mark Waid all came to the shop to give a talk. Basically, 3 of the 4 guys who worked on 52. And I think it was Mark Waid was telling a story about, he was talking to like a kid, like his nephew or something like that. And the nephew, who was like 4 or something, was like, could Animal Man take Superman's power? And Mark Waid was like, I never thought of that. I totally need to use that for a story sometime.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I thought of it before Mark Waid.
Yeah.
I'm so smart.
Well,
But-
at what point do you distinguish? And that's kind of the whole thing. Is like, and this is kind of where that whole idea breaks down, right? It's like, well, he's making the whole argument through this whole book that there's no difference between humans and animals. So why isn't he just doing that? Superman's on Earth. Well, guess I'm Superman now.
Well, technically, let me push my nerd glasses up, because all he would be able to do is change his cells into Kryptonian cells, which would then need to charge from the power of the sun. And as we know, when new Kryptonians arrive on Earth, they're never as strong as Superman.
Yeah, but they're still stronger than Buddy Baker.
Yeah.
But are they stronger than a gorilla or a rhino?
Because as we see in New Krypton,
We don't know.
They're strong enough to pull whales out of the fucking ocean and fly them half a continent away and then throw them.
But so could a
Okay,
gorilla.
now this is a conversation I don't want to have anymore because this is way too fucking
So
nerdy.
this is funny.
Oh.
I've been going back and listening to a bunch of new episodes, and you can always tell Toby always does this. He's like, we're not going to have that conversation. And I say to you, sir, we are going to have that conversation because this is a fucking comic book podcast.
I will steer this podcast into the sea
I will
before I let you take
steer
control
it
of it.
directly up your ass.
Because
I don't know
I
even
am
how I would do
I'm
that.
trying to keep us on track and not just get fucking lost in the weeds talking about crazy
We
bullshit.
can cut that
You
shit
do
later.
it as much as we do, and when it's you, nobody's like, Toby, bring it back in here. Bring it back.
I
in
just
here.
cut it out later.
That's because I have a sense of
argue,
pacing.
You can argue that, shit, I just lost it. No, okay. You can argue that he can take humans' powers because he can take insects' powers.
Well, he does.
And humans are actually closer to Anomalia than insects are.
That's true.
That's true.
So,
Well,
therefore,
yeah.
there's no difference between taking.
But is it really the power of an insect that lets it? Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, his power makes no sense. That's the
no,
whole point.
I know, and that's what I like. And they reference the mutagenic field in the New 52 Animal Man, and Jeff Lemire has Buddy Baker basically be like, "It's just some bullshit they told me at Star Labs. I always preferred to call it the web," and like kind of like glosses over that. But like, I like that they reference it, and that like he went and had his powers checked out by Star Labs, and they were like. Tried to explain it to him, and he was like, no, that's dumb. Because that's how I feel like you would be if you were a superhero. You're like, yeah, I'm not calling it that.
Totally.
No, this is a rocket fart punch. Like, that's what I'm going to call it.
Rocket fart punch!
Like, I get to call it whatever I want. I'm the superhero. I like that. Anyway.
I wonder if he could take the power of a bombardier beetle and make his own ass explode.
He takes the power of a pistol shrimp in one of these. Although I don't know why he doesn't
like that
take the mantis shrimp and just punch people's body
Wait,
parts.
And there's the time he takes the power of the insect and literally slows down time for him to cut off that arm.
It's a fly. It's a fly. Yeah,
It's a
fly,
Flies
yeah.
experience things 10 times faster. The crazy thing is that I was thinking about this because of the pistol shrimp thing. If he did take the powers of a mantis shrimp, he'd I mean, if you took that power and proportionally built it up, like they punch so hard that they create vacuum pockets in front of their fucking fist that then explode.
Okay, if Superman
Scyther's
can punch
vacuum
that
wave
hard,
cough.
Animal Man with the power of a mantis shrimp could punch that hard.
He could.
And not destroy himself.
No, I'm not saying he would destroy himself. I'm saying he would destroy what was ever on the other side of his fist.
Isn't that the point?
And he should go. I'm just saying, I want to read a miniseries where he's punching the limbs off of. He's just like punch, and somebody's arm goes flying.
Well, if you want to read that series, read the Luther Strode, which I pitched on previous episodes.
did.
But there's lots of punching people's limbs off in that book.
Yes, and we
When the third trade comes out, that might be something we talk about. But anyway, back onto Animal Man. I think this is a crazy important story in the DC universe, and I think that Animal Man, the fact that he is a character at all in the DC universe, is totally because of this story.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth reading.
I think you should do what you want. I'm not going to tell you to read it, but I'm not going to tell you to not read it either.
Well, they've already read it at this point. It's too fucking late.
I'm going to say there are better superhero stories by Grant Morrison.
Yeah, but I think that this is a good baby's first Grant Morrison story, and I don't mean that derogatorily.
No,
I mean, I read in The Invisibles and was like driven half insane by it, and then I read this, and then I read The Invisibles again, and then I read The Invisibles like 2 more times, and then I started to understand it.
I read all of
Doom
Grant
Patrol.
Morrison's X-Men.
Well, that was actually
That was the first thing of Morrison's I ever read.
Oh, maybe that was because that was later. That was the 90s. I think I read this first. I don't remember. Anyway, should we do Rex then? Does anybody have anything
I
else?
have one more thing that I want to throw out, and I don't think it needs any kind of response. I really liked Ellen Baker. I thought she was a cool character.
Yeah, I agree.
And I really felt when she died.
I like his kids too. I like that he has a family. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I like it.
like even aside from the whole like he is the protagonist and he has a family, like as a character, I thought that she was cool.
She was cool, and
Yeah.
she had agency.
Yeah.
I
She
will
did.
say that, I mean, she had
And
a big
She
even-
was the moneymaker.
As far as I am in the New 52 Animal Man, she still is a very interesting character with good agency. So,
You do.
because she gets attacked by like a crazy ass monster, and she doesn't go, buddy, say. She
Well,
like
she
has
totally,
a shotgun,
I mean,
and
she
it's
takes
like,
on the Mirror Master in here. And,
oh, I
and-
forgot that the Mirror Master's
And
in
like,
here.
that's funny because
Is it her or him who kicks him in the balls?
She does.
That's
Yeah.
right.
She
yeah.
does it, and like
Yeah.
Wally West can't do that shit at like at
Well,
the same.
this was the new Mirror Master. Like, when he
No, this is the original
This
one.
is
This
the
is
Pollock,
yeah,
yeah.
this is the original.
Okay,
one.
I thought the second one was Irish.
No, the first one
never
was
mind.
he's a Scot,
Yeah, he's
Oh,
Scottish.
okay.
and
Shows
the
what I
second
know.
one doesn't come in until later, and he's much darker.
Yeah, I love that the Mirror Master's in this story.
And I love the fact that he's like, they fucked around with me, so now I'm going to tell you what's going on, and we're going
Yeah.
to kill them together.
That was great. There's so much fun superhero stuff going on in this
There
stuff.
is.
It's great.
And that brings me back to how I opened this. This book is so complex and works on so many levels.
I totally agree. I like this book. I'm glad that I reread it, because I should do that like every year.
I enjoyed myself, and I know that Joe, even though he has problems, there were parts of it he thoroughly enjoyed.
I
himself.
do. I totally did. I enjoyed the first part of this book. I thought there was some good stuff there.
Yeah,
I
that,
wouldn't tell any. If somebody came to me and said, "I'm thinking about reading Grant Morrison's Animal Man," I'd be like, "Okay, have fun with that." I wouldn't say no. Don't like. There are definitely books that people come up to me and they're
Yeah.
like, "I'm going to read this," and I'm like, "Don't do that."
Terrell the Black
If
Witch.
you love yourself, if you care about yourself in the slightest, don't read that. Read this instead because it's better.
Yeah, no,
But
I agree.
I
I
guess
think
I'm
you shouldn't
left-
stop anyone from reading this. I think it's important.
No, and I personally am left feeling very like meh at the end.
There's one
There's-
other thing about the book that I both liked and didn't like, and I feel kind of conflicted about, which is the cover to issue 6, which is the one with the super strappy hawk girl on it.
That's
Yes.
not Hot Girl.
Well,
No,
okay,
that's
it's
just
a
a random
female
thing.
Thanagarian.
My favorite part about
was
that
my-
is I saw the cover and I was like, God, they are really objectifying her sexually. And then you see the male Hawkman's costume,
Yeah.
and it's the fucking same. And I was like, duh, nope,
Yep.
it's not sexist
Yep.
anymore. Thanagarians are just fucking nuts.
Yes,
they just are
exactly.
wearing, like, they're wearing the fucking Goliath costume, and they all wear it, and they're a space-faring, intergalactic race of warriors
and
wearing,
their costumes
like,
are all like
bondage gear.
yellow and green, red and yellow, green and yellow.
And then they're fucking. Also, Thanagarians don't fly via their wings. That's
No,
not.
they
They have
have
like an
metal.
anti-gravity belt, and they were like, "What's the best way to stabilize ourselves? How about giant fucking feather wings? They're the worst race ever, and I
This-
love them
this
to
book
death."
has my favorite cameo in it, actually, when Hawkman comes up at the end and he's like, just
Oh, you
turn
just
it
had
off.
to turn it off, which is referenced in a great way later. This book
Yeah.
is super self-referential for
It's
only
awesome.
being 26 issues.
But yeah, I looked at that cover and I was like, that's kind of sexist, but it's also kind of cool in sort of like a prog rock kind of way.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like a heavy metal cover
Oh, yeah.
kind of way. And then when you get to the inside and the male hawk guy is wearing like this strappy bondage gear
The
thing.
only difference is the men wear pants. That's literally she's
Yeah.
wearing shorts and high, like really thigh high boots, and he's wearing pants, and that's the only difference between their costumes. I love it so much.
Yeah,
There's a
it's
great,
like,
there's a
wow,
great
sexism is
webcomic.
over because this is equally offensive on both sides.
There's the great webcomic that I totally love. That is, it's making fun of the fact that women in video games they have different armor.
Yes.
And so she like puts the armor on and is like, what is this? Why do I have to wear this? We should both wear the same armor. And then the next panel, instead of being her in male armor, is the dude in the same like bra armor. And he's like, I have so much mobility now. This is amazing.
I got into an argument with some guy on Reddit today about this.
You
And
would.
about the whole, like, women aren't victims, you're making things up, men are also hypersexualized, and I'm like, of course. See, those of us that are capable of, like, higher brain function know that men and women in comic books are drawn by men, for men. They're both male power fantasies, right? You don't have a lot of women doing this. And he insisted on his point, and then he called me a white knight, which I took as me winning the argument because he had nothing more to say. But the thing is that I really honestly believe that if you look at comic books, this is an exception, because normally it's not. Normally you have Wonder Woman with her ass and tits hanging out among a bunch of men that are wearing long underwear. And if you don't know that this is true, and I'm not talking like you may have a problem admitting it's hard to admit that there's sexism in something you love. I understand this. It's the whole problematic thing. Like we talk about it all the time, right? But like if you're going to stand there and say that is not a thing, then you need to open up the nearest flammable thing around you and just dive right into it and fucking stay there until you're dead. Because I don't want you in my fandom. Like you are not needed.
Joe at viewfromthegutters.com.
Do it.
Joe
Do
at
it.
viewfromthegutters.com. And let's do Rex. Who wants to go first?
Toby just farted.
What?
Just saying. I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying.
I'll
I'll
go first. We've been
Yeah.
talking about late 80s DC and the way that it fits into the DC universe. And so I brought one that was on the same vein, one of the titles, along with Animal Man, that created Vertigo.
Yeah.
And that is Neil Gaiman's Sandman.
All right.
So it's the Sandman Volume 1, Preludes and Nocturnes. And this is...
I think this would be an interesting long run at some point, too.
Yeah, I'm
So,
actually
I would
toying
like
with
to do
the
that one
idea
day.
of doing it for the long run.
yeah,
But
this
yeah,
is...
this is the second version of Sandman. So this is Sandman 2, basically, because this was after Wesley Dodds. And post-Crisis, they brought in Neil Gaiman and said, we want a new Sandman that has nothing to do with Wesley Dodds, and just go nuts with it. And he did.
And kind of in the same way that they were doing stuff like that in the Silver Age with guys that like really kind of had nothing to do with their Golden Age original counterparts,
Yeah.
which is cool because there was an original Blue Beetle.
Yes.
And Ted Korg has nothing to do with that.
No, Blue Beetle was much more of an adventure-y type.
Well, he was like a Indiana Jones that found this artifact that like
Yeah.
gave him magic powers. So like Blue Beetle, Ted Korg is nothing, has no similar origin to that. So I think this is cool. I think this is a cool way for them to like tie into that Silver Age aesthetic.
And it's good. I think it's funny that it's called Preludes and Nocturnes, and they're releasing Overture right now, which is the actual prelude to Preludes and Nocturnes. But they're calling it Overture.
It's a really interesting series, and I feel like it would be hard to read just the first volume.
Yeah, it's,
It
I've
doesn't
never
give you
finished
a
this
I
sense of
series.
the
agree.
depth of the series because I don't think that it really starts to get good until, and I'm not sure when exactly this is in the trades, but the Serial Convention.
That's the
That's
second
the
trade.
guy with the guy with the eyeball mounts.
Yeah,
The Corinthian.
But yeah, it's after that arc that I think it starts to get good.
Yeah, that's about where
Well, the
I
main thing
give up
is-
every time
is
that I'm reading.
If
No.
you liked Animal Man,
Yeah,
I think
you
this
should-
is another book that you should
Absolutely.
You should read all of
Sandman.
it. It's a must read.
I like Sandman. I've never finished the series as a whole. I'm going to
never
say
have
that.
either.
But I really like it. I love this early stuff, too, because the first trade is really interesting. It's kind of like a getting this character back into the world because he's an endless, like he's lived forever, but he has not been a part of the DC universe as we know it. So how they get him to fit together with all that is really cool. And I like when he's going to get all his shit again and like, just putting everything. It's kind of like a putting the band back together, but he's just like putting
and it
himself
sets up
back together.
this sets up some very this is the things that happen in this first trade resonate throughout the entire series,
Yeah.
which is
Much
impressive.
like they did in Animal Man.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this series is really fun. And a lot of different artists worked on this and a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah,
happened in
a
the
lot of
series.
people get their start here too.
Yeah.
It's one of Sam Keith's earlier works. You got Mike Dringenberg. You've got just a bunch of great stuff. People like Jill Thompson and Kelly Jones would
Who
all
was
do
the
stuff on
famous
it.
inker that did like so much of this?
Oh God, I can't.
I don't know. Anyway, there are a lot of amazing artists that work on this series, and this series is really fun. And Neil Gaiman is a great writer. And we've taught, if you like Neil Gaiman and you want to read another Neil Gaiman book, go read Marvel 1602 and then listen to that episode.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I'll go next.
Yeah.
So after we pitched at Joe, stop that.
I'm ready.
He's looking at me in this really weird way.
He's giving you
Stop
bedroom
it.
eyes.
You're freaking me out.
I'm ready.
You sound like Venture. The nozzle is calibrating. Calibrating the nozzle.
We will
So-
now move on to the next stage.
After I pitched Animal Man, we were talking about, like, we've been doing a lot of DC stuff recently.
Yeah.
And I think we've been doing a lot of superhero stuff recently, which isn't bad, I think it kind of goes in cycles. But I specifically wanted to pitch something that I hadn't pitched before and something that was not a superhero book. So I was looking at my shelf before work this morning going, what haven't I pitched? What's good? And I realized that I had a book on my shelf that I got like 6 months ago and had never, ever read, even though I'd been meaning to. Basically, one day I just like cleaned off my bookshelf and I got an entire like brown paper bag full of books. I went down to the local bookshop and I turned them in for credit, and then I just got a stack of graphic novels. And so the thing that I brought that I read the first half of while I was at lunch today is Pedro and Me by Judd Winnick. And if you only know Judd Winnick from his Green Lantern run or his Batman run or even from Green Arrow.
Green Arrow.
I thought he did Green Lantern.
He did
Okay.
Green Arrow,
Arrow.
Exiles.
Anyway,
Can't
or even Barry Ween.
Yeah.
Back in the early 90s, Judd Winnick was on MTV's Real World San Francisco, season 3.
And if you're ancient like I am, you'll remember that as the season that had fucking Puck on it. Which, if you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
And okay, so at the time that came out, I was like 10 or 11 years old. And like I caught a little bit of it. Like I remember Puck, and he was an asshole. And I vaguely remember that there was a character on this show who was I say character, a person.
Well, they are kind
a human
of characters,
being
though.
On the show who was HIV positive,
Yeah.
which at that time was like really kind of weird. And
It was
people didn't know how to react to HIV positive people. Like they didn't understand how AIDS worked really.
It wasn't talked about ever.
It was something that was very like taboo to talk about, that was very creepy and was very heavily associated with gay culture. And this
drug
was at a
use.
time period when people were still saying loudly that the AIDS virus was sent by God to kill gay people. And I mean, some people still do say that today, and they're fucking monsters.
Saying that.
But it was a much more mainstream opinion at the time. And Judd Winnick was on the show. And this is where he met his wife, and this is where he met that person whose name is Pedro. And they became really close friends. And Pedro died something like 4 months after the show finished.
Yeah, it wasn't.
It was a little longer than
Yeah,
that.
I don't remember.
I'm only halfway through the book, so I don't know how it ends. I mean, I know obviously the guy dies because it says so in like the very beginning of the book.
Yeah.
This is one of my all-time favorite books. I've loaned this out to many people, including people that have never read comics, and they have loved it, including both my parents.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
this is a very emotionally heartfelt, very personal eulogy for someone who Judd Winnick was very close friends with.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm only halfway through, so I've still got a ways to go. Because it's incredibly touching and heartfelt and emotionally bearing.
Judd Winnick was on The Real World with Pedro, and like even on the show, he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be a comic book artist writer." Like even then, he knew, and so this was definitely like.
And he was still trying. He was still writing Saturday morning.
Yeah, and this was his like first, real foray into the world of comics, and it's a really interesting.
And it's an excellent it's an excellent effort for as early in his career as it is.
Yeah, and we were talking about Grant Morrison earlier. How he was taking kind of his first steps into how he would write, and I think that this Judd Winnick story is really good.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely has. Pedro has definitely influenced his writing. I mean, he's definitely, which is why it's so weird for me to understand Catwoman. But
yeah, I mean, isn't one of the first things that he did when he started writing Green Arrow was introduce an HIV positive?
Yeah,
character?
the new Speedy. Her name
Mia
is
Jordan.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what her name is, but it comes out that she's
Yeah, it was either issue 24 or 26.
She's an intravenous drug user.
Well,
isn't she?
No, she was a former prostitute.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay, Speedy. That's the run where Speedy is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or Roy Harper is.
Yeah, Roy Harper is on heroin or something.
Is
well, that was previous.
Yeah, he's cleaning up from that.
Well, no, he's already cleaned up from that because
Is he?
he is Arsenal already.
Yeah.
I have no concept of time.
We know
run
that.
is that's.
But yeah, Pedro and Me is really it's good. Mm-hmm. It's personal, and it's not a superhero book.
Yep,
that's true.
Joe, what did you bring?
I brought Agents of Atlas, which is a redemption book for me. I love it. We've been doing a lot of DC and superheroes, and this is much more adventure, spy, kind of stuff, and it's a Marvel book, and it's Jeff Parker and Leonard Kirk, and it's one of my favorite things to read because it has a secret agent, a gorilla man, a giant robot, an alien, and the goddess of love. And
Namora.
And Namora, yeah. And so if that doesn't fucking get you if you're not interested right off the bat, I mean, honestly, if giant robot, or if silent, I guess he's a giant robot.
He's taller than a man.
Big robot. If Big Robot and Gorilla Man didn't get you, then there's no hope for you, and I don't know why you're reading comic books. But
And at one point, Gorilla Man jumps through the air while firing 4 machine guns.
He is held in the air by the Robot Man, firing a machine gun in each of his hands and feet, and it is fucking epic, and I love it.
This is actually like one of my favorite, not very well-known comic books.
Yeah, and this comic story tells a great story. The art is great, the coloring is great, and it does what I think a comic book should do, which is just has a lot of fun with you. There's some great teamwork going on. I think it's good. It's good through and through. Like, I really have very few nitpicks with it. So yeah, I really think it's a fun book to read, and so I thought I'd bring it back and see if we can get it in there.
Yeah, sounds
And
good.
the title is because all of these characters were originally characters in Atlas comics back in the 50s, who have been kind of resurrected in the modern age.
Yeah,
And if you get the hardcover, it might be in a trade paperback too.
I think it is,
but it's got all of the first appearances of these characters.
Yeah,
At the end,
which is really cool. And this was a limited series that would go on to spawn a monthly series that was quickly canceled, but good. So, yeah, I mean, check it out either way, but I'd like to talk about it, so I brought it back.
All right. This week, I'm bringing...
Drum roll, please.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't tell anybody what I was bringing. I've been working on catching up on reading modern comics for a future project for this show. Boom. Which is probably going to be dropping like pretty soon after this releases. So hopefully, yeah. Hopefully we get shit on track by then. But yeah, working on a new project for the show. And so I'm getting caught up on all new ongoing comics that are coming out every week. So I was at the store reading the new comics this week, and issue 6 of a book that I had never heard of, given a moment's thought to, or even cared about, came out, which was The Superior Foes of Spider-Man, volume number 6 came out. And I was like, well, fuck it, I'll read the first 5 and see, what this series is all about. And it's fucking amazing. I talked to people for like hours about how good this book is this week, and everybody wants me to shut up about it. So I want you guys to read it, so I have more people to talk to about it.
I've actually been reading it. And I'm surprised I didn't guess at the top of the show that that's what it was.
Because it's right up my fucking
I'm not
alley.
Even thinking about it because I didn't even like that much. I mean, I think it's all right.
It's
but
so up my alley. It's like
didn't throw me.
Someone is writing stuff for me, and that happens every so often where I'll pick a book up and I'll be like, "This is for me." Like, most people won't enjoy this, but I will. It's a team of super villains, the Sinister Six. They have 5 members. They are Captain. No, it's Boomerang Man. The Boomerang. What is his name?
No, it's God. I think it's just Boomerang.
He's a Boomerang. Okay. Yeah. Boomerang is a character that throws boomerangs. The new Beetle, who is a woman. There's some speedster Speed Demon. Who
was originally the Wizard, who was part of the Squadron Sinister.
Right. And
so he's not even a real human being. He was created by the Grandmaster.
That's right. And then
the Wizard.
No, Shocker. And is
that last guy. There's one more.
A fifth? Did I name them all? No, I think I named them all.
No, there's one more.
Beetle, Boomerang, Wizard, Shocker.
Crap. Keep talking about
it. Okay, and another one.
It
No, it's another one of the Sinister Six, and then they don't have a 6th member.
Wizard.
Which is hilarious.
The Wizard.
Because earlier in the book at the beginning, they're like, well, who did you find out who it is?
No.
Okay. Early in the book, they're like, oh, we need to get a sixth member. And the wizard's like, no, we don't, because people will see that there's 5 of us, and they'll be like, who's the sixth member? It could be anyone. It could even be Dormammu, which I already love Dormammu, but it's like, and then that comes up later when Nick Cage and Iron Fist show up to fight them. They're like, well, look out for the other 2 members. It could be anyone. And he's like, I told you that would work. But this book is about supervillains that are kind of shitty at being supervillains. It explores a lot of the ideas of, like, why would you even be a villain in this Marvel universe? Because you're just going to lose all the time. Boomerang has just gotten out of prison, and he's on parole, and his parole officer is the previous Beetle, who's now a hero thanks to the Thunderbolts program. And so it's like, they used to be on a team together, so there's all this like weird chemistry between the 2 of them. The art style reminds me a lot of Hawkeye. If you're liking Hawkeye and you're liking the humor that the art plays into that book.
Overdrive was the name you were looking for.
Oh, yeah, the Wheelman, who's like barely even in the book.
I don't even remember. Anyway, I can't even remember that now. But they're just like, the art is a lot of the visual jokes in the same way that that Hawkeye is, and it plays into the weirdest parts of Marvel mythology in a great way. Like Silvermane, who was a Spider-Man foe, who then got a robot body, and whose robot body was destroyed. Like, they're trying to steal Silvermane's head from the Owl. And just, like, all this weird, bizarre shit is happening all the time. It's super funny. There's barely any heroes in it. It's everything I love. I've now pitched 2 villain team-up books in a row on the show, because last week I picked Super Crooks. But this book is hilarious. It's so funny. It's well-drawn. The art's great. It explores everything about that I love about comics, and it would in no way be allowed at DC right now because of their house style, which is all the more reason to go read it, because it just shows that, like, books that are weird, wacky, different, and exploring other parts of what it is to have a superhero universe are necessary and fun.
Absolutely.
And I love it. I think the book's fucking amazing. And I look forward to it now more than any other Marvel book that's coming out, and that's crazy to me.
All right.
So
sounds good. So where do we start the voting?
Cade, what do you want to read?
I don't know. I want to say, if anyone else votes for Pedro, then I want to vote for that. If not, I want to vote for Superior
Foes of Spider-Man. Well, you're voting first, so
Foes of Spider-Man.
The Fuse of Spider-Man.
And Spider-Man is not in.
He's never been in
issues.
that book. No, not one time. Well, maybe he was in a flashback.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, I think at some point he's in a flash. They're like thinking back to having been. I think he gets webbed up in a flashback in his mind.
Yes,
but I don't know that Spider-Man's ever really like on a panel ever.
I don't think so.
It's great though. It's such a good book. There's so many just like misdirections and fun turn of events that are good. All right, so what are you voting for, Cade?
I have no idea. I guess Pedro.
All right.
I'm voting for Superior Foes of Spider-Man.
That's also what I'm going to vote for.
Yeah, buddy. I'm so excited to have people to talk to about this. I made Sam take all the issues home to read it. So I was like, no one else has read this book. Someone talk to me about it, please. I don't care if you guys hate it. I still love it.
I don't hate it. It just like doesn't throw me. Like my brother's been reading it and he really likes it.
Oh, good.
And I'm
We'll
just
have him
kind
on
of
the
like,
show.
this is okay.
We need to have your brother on the show again so he can tell you how wrong you are.
Yeah. We should totally do that. Maybe we can get Sam on the show.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
We're all looking at Joe because he leaned in very close to his microphone,
He's
and
been
then
doing that
undramatically
all night.
was like, "Yes, yep, that was my joke, visual gag."
Okay.
I agree with everything everybody has said.
See
All right.
you next time, folks.
Yep. Thanks for listening, guys. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.